to attempt to distill kind of Journey's core heartbeat down to just a couple of words, okay? If we just kind of boiled it all down and said, what compels us? What are we trying to follow Jesus in doing? You probably could get it to 5 words, okay? Just 5 really simple words. More life for more people. Okay, we're not a complex group. I'm not a complex guy. That's about as far as my intelligence level lets us go. It's right there, okay? It's 5 words. More life for more people. More life for more people. That takes all different shapes and sizes and looks and is something that we believe we can be experiencing with Jesus every day in every season in every condition of our life. But it always begins, listen, it always begins with the beginning of a relationship with Jesus, this gift called salvation, where people like you and me, we respond to this invitation of grace, where Jesus invites us into relationship with Him and literally in that moment rescues us and makes our spirit come alive. And then we begin this relationship with Him. We have this hope of heaven, but we have this hope of life with Him and in His presence right now, more life for more people. And so we're celebrating that all the time and talking about ways that's happening and taking shape. And I just want to give you an opportunity to celebrate that just in the past week, in fact, in the past handful of days, 2 people, just kind of through just unique circumstances and times and conversations, 2 people have walked into that relationship with Jesus and begun to follow Him. And yep, that's it. In fact, you can do better than that. Come on, you can do better than that. Yep. You say. I love it. Now, here's my little sidebar. If you've been in church your whole life and you don't like celebrating that, I'd like to introduce you to a concept called grace. And you might still need, no, never mind. I love you too much to say it all the way. Love you too much to finish that sentence. So that's what we're about. That's what we're celebrating. If you like celebrating people's life change, that's what we're doing because that's what Jesus is doing. And again, I say this to us all the time, but only one time in all the Bible do we find all of heaven celebrating at one time. And it's when one person walks into a relationship with Jesus. It's the only thing that seems to distract all of heaven from everything else that's going on. Like, did you see that? And so that's why we celebrate it too. So I love celebrating it with you. Now let's go on a little bit of a trip. Okay, I want to just invite you to put yourself inside of maybe a 7-passenger van, okay? Just kind of picture yourself there. It can be yours or it can be borrowed or it can be your dream 7-passenger van if there is such a thing, okay? It can be your limo van, okay? Whatever it is, okay? And now just put some of your favorite people in there, okay? It could be your best friends. It could be people that have been your friends for 30 years. It could be a new friend you made this morning. It doesn't really matter. Just put some people in there. And now we're going to take a trip, and we're going to travel from here to Washington, D.C., okay? And it's going to be a great trip. You can stop all the times you want. You can get all the snacks you want. It's a no-calorie trip, so whatever you eat doesn't count. If you're into that, I mean, it's all good, right? Gas is free. It's a great trip, okay? It's perfect. The weather is whatever your optimal weather is. And if you don't agree with the people in the van, it doesn't matter. This is an imaginary thing, okay? Travel with me here. But it's a great trip, okay? And when you get to Washington, D.C., here's what you are guaranteed. What you are guaranteed when you arrive in Washington, D.C., is you are guaranteed a captive audience with Congress, okay? You're guaranteed a captive audience. Okay, you're guaranteed that they're going to listen to what you say. And you can say whatever you want. Now, just think about it for a minute. Just think about it. Go ahead. Go there. It's kind of fun for a minute. Go ahead. Go there. Now, when you take all those initial thoughts, I want you to fold them all up. I want you to walk back out and put them in the van just for a little bit and leave them there, okay? You don't have to abandon them forever. But let's just leave all of our causes in the car. Let's leave all of our opinions about causes in the car. Okay, they're worth something, and that's great. I'm not asking you to abandon them. Just for a little bit, leave them, like stow them under the seat or something. Walk back in, and now let's narrow the focus a little bit. If you could talk to Congress simply about how to manage money, okay? I thought you might find that humorous. Not where to spend it, not on this cause, not on that cause. Just manage, just in principles. manage money? What might you think about saying? What principles might you think about giving them? What counsel, what advice? Again, not associated with your cause. Not I think we should spend this much money over here. Not I think we should put this much money towards this. None of that. Just the principles and practices. If you got to parent Congress for a little bit, what might you say? We'll come back to that in a little bit. I think it's really important because of this. Like when we think about life and we think about how we experience life on the earth, the reality is that money is just part of it, right? Money is this thing that we have some, we give some. It's just part of it. And yet, boy, there are very few things that can push against our hope like money can. When we're upside down with money, when money's out of sorts, when we've hit a tough time, it can just do something to our hope. And so what we're just trying to say in these handful of weeks is, hey, what does it look like to experience life with Jesus and understand that life's purpose shapes money's purpose, not the other way around? What does it look like to experience life with Jesus so that we even live with our money with Jesus so that hope is protected regardless of circumstance? What does that look like? And so last week we said, let's talk about the heart. Let's just lean in and go heart first right away. And we kind of just learned together three things. And here's what we did last week. We just said, let's lock in on these things. Like, let's live like the manager, not the owner. God owns it. Let's let him be the owner. Let's enjoy the privilege of managing it, not get so consumed with what we think our rights maybe should be. Let's live grateful, not grumbling. A lot of conversations about that the past week. And even a lot of you sending notes just about gratefulness and everything else. And I'll just tell you, I can't even fully explain it, but Friday was one of the worst days I've had in a really long time. A really, really long time. And I'd really kind of got stuck in it for a little bit. And Saturday morning, I hate it sometimes when I'm the one who preached it, because Saturday morning, that all came running back to me. Buck, come on, go this way, John. Like the invitation of Jesus to just live grateful, to live grateful. And I can't tell you it doesn't fix everything, didn't change, but it changes me. It changes me. It changes the game and how I'm viewing what I feel like I'm up against a little bit. And we live from what is sacred, what's the long haul. And we just talked about, this is how we can shape contentment in our heart. This is how we learn to be content, like this guy Paul who wrote part of the New Testament. So that when money gets weird and things get tough and the economy has a setback, and we can kind of just pause and say, oh, wait, but my heart can be content. My heart can be at rest, regardless of what it looks like the circumstances of my finances is really are. Now today, what we're going to do, is we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're just going to be remarkably practical. Like if we talked about the heart last week, which I think is the most important thing, is because the life's purpose shapes the money's purpose. Now, how can we just get remarkably practical? Well, here's what we know. There's only so many places at the end of the day your money goes. In fact, just take a look at this. We'll just put a little diagram. There's only so many places our money goes, right? And we start in the middle with God owns it all. Okay, we can argue about it, but at the end of the day, we don't take it with us. It doesn't go, right? Hearses don't, pull banks behind them. It's God's. We live on some. That's what we spend. That's what we invest. That's what we pay some of our bills with. We live that. We hopefully we're giving some. We might owe some to a debt, maybe a house payment or something. There's some there, right? We pay some taxes. We live in a system where we pay some taxes. We hopefully have some that's growing for us. We would love to have some that we're thinking about, boy, that's cool if I had a long term and something actually where money is just working for me. But how do we actually do that? And did Jesus, in the story of Jesus, do we actually find any help, any both inspiration and insight on how to actually live that out? On how to live that in a way that could help protect our heart in a way that was full of wisdom and skillful living. And probably at times was very, very, very against the norm. Like very against what culture might say. Well, what I want to do this morning is I want to just share with us 5 kind of really practical principles, ways to live this thing out. And some of you will have heard them before. We've even talked about them before. They're kind of captured best by a guy named Ron Blue. And Ron Blue has been giving kind of Jesus-shaped counsel on money for decades. And Ron Blue actually got that chance with Congress. He actually got the chance that you and I wish we could have with Congress. He actually got to walk in and sit down and then say, Ron, tell us, like how people should maybe manage their money and handle their money. And Congress was asking about people, just in general, people like you and me. And Ron gave them these principles. He gave them 4 out of the 5, and then he threw in the 5th one as like this bonus for people like you and I. It's more than a bonus. And one congressman looked at the list and said, well, Ron, that list looks to me like anybody could do this, right? And maybe even the United States government could do this, right? Now you'll see quickly they haven't done it, but it's possible. But it's possible, and it's possible for you and me. And again, here's what I want to say. Like, we learn contentment because contentment is found in Jesus. But listen. But let's not leave Jesus back at the heart condition of contentment. Let's lean into Jesus for his contentment and learn that. But then let's ask Jesus how we live outwardly and practically as well, because that's going to end up influencing the contentment. If we try and live in a way that's opposite the one who gave us the contentment, they're going to conflict and we're going to get discombobulated somewhere. So what we're doing is we're really saying, now, Jesus, I trust you for contentment. You are my contentment. You're my sure source and foundation. But now, how do you invite me to live with this thing called money in this world? So let's just build it. We're actually going to build it like a little puzzle on the screen. So for those of you who are artists, yes, you're going to be all excited. For those of you who, like me, are not and are very linear, just write the points in order. It's fine. It doesn't matter. You don't go. You're not missing out on anything. Okay. Here's the first one. We're going to start right in the middle. The most important thing is spend less than you earn. We start by spending less than you earn. Now, can you see why that was good advice from Ron Blue to Congress? Can you see why that might be really good advice for some of us? Yeah, I mean, it seems so simple, right? But come on, it's challenging. Let's just own it's challenging, right? We've talked about this a lot early this year. In the pressure of comparison and the pressure of gain and the pressure of it can be a little bit challenging. The writer of Proverbs, who we're going to look at a few times today, just wrote all of this wisdom and this insight about all of life, including about our money and our resources. Because again, even he was at one point the richest man the world had ever seen, and he understood that richness alone didn't satisfy. And so he wrote a lot about how we handle it and view it. And this is what the writer of Proverbs said in Proverbs 21. Check this out. It says this: the wise people, skillful people, they store up choice food in olive oil. Okay? But fools gulp theirs down. Do you hear it? Like, the picture being painted is wise people live with what they have. Fools try and live on more than they have. Wise people live on what they have. They're slowing down the train long enough to say, look, what we earn, that's our limit. And some stats as recently as a year ago said the average American spent 116% of their income. I'm not even sure how you do it, but we do it. Right? We do it, and that's the average. That's not the exception out there somewhere. That's the average. So that's lots of us probably, right? And yet there's this advice, this invitation to say, no, whatever we earn, let's let that be our first limit. Let's spend less money. In Proverbs, right in the middle of the Bible, just saying, yeah, that's kind of the thing. And then here's the second one, and this is the one that Ron Blue threw in as a bonus to Congress, but he has lived with these 5 principles forever, and this is huge for us. The second one is simply that we give generously. We give generously. We want to just be givers by nature. We want to be people who are so captured by God's giving to us that the most natural thing we would do is give. But I want to give you fair caution in this thing, okay? One of my friends a handful of years ago, it's probably 15 or 20 years ago, was just ridiculously generous and being generous, and he was being taught by people to be generous. But here's why generous fits in with the whole puzzle, okay? And here's why generous fits with the first piece of the puzzle. What I didn't know at the time was that all of his generosity was going on credit cards. He wasn't just spending more than he made, he was giving more than he was making. The average American's spending 116% of their income. He was giving some obscene amount of his income, right? Because here's what happens. We assume that generosity alone is the only part of walking with God in this reality, when God is actually saying, no, wait, man, I want to be generous, but I want to help you. I want to help all of your finances. I want to help protect your life, your money, and your hope, all of it together as one part of your life. So generosity matters, and it matters as part of the whole in how we handle it. This guy, Paul, who kind of gave us the push to learn about contentment and understand what contentment means, he wrote this to a group of people in Corinth, and this is what he said about giving. He said, remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds, you're only going to get a small crop. He's like, there's only so much blessing in giving little, but the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. There's this good in being generous. Look at what he says in verse 7. I love this. You got to decide. In your own heart, you and Jesus, you're going to decide this thing, how much to give, and don't give reluctantly, and don't give in response to pressure. For God loves a person who gives cheerfully. We're just going to leave that there for a second. This is part of why we say in our context all the time that we're not going to twist people's arms to give. We're not doing that. Like, you shouldn't feel guilted into giving. Jesus doesn't have guilt to give, so he can't make you guilty about giving, right? It's just, we want to give out of this cheerfulness of heart because we love what we've received from Jesus, so we love giving like Jesus. Let me just say it again, right? We love receiving what we receive from Jesus, so we love giving like Jesus. Okay? We're not giving to try and please Jesus or please people. We're not giving to try and earn anything, right? We're giving cheerfully, man, not reluctantly, not with weird pressure. And then Paul goes on, he finishes this little thought this way in verse 8. And he said, and when you do that, God's then going to generously provide all you need. Then you're going to have everything you need. And you'll actually have some things left over to share with others. And again, he's talking in this case about money, about finances, and how the Corinthian church was bringing their giving on the first day of the week when they gathered together. But the principle plays in everything. Share joy generously. Share encouragement generously. Share hopes and dreams generously. Share patience generously. Share forgiveness and grace generously. Share just the person of Jesus himself generously. See, what Paul is kind of getting at here in this thing is he's saying, look, when you bring, what you're really doing is you're bringing out of love. You're not bringing to leverage anything, and you're not trying to leverage anybody else, and you're not feeling leveraged. You're bringing out of love. What he's really getting at is money as a currency of love is far better than money as a currency of power. I mean, man, listen, it's easy in our world to kind of clamor for power, right? I want to be very, very careful with the statement I'm about to say next, but can we just keep using the Congress example a little bit? See, a lot of us would have a little bit of a tainted view on a government's ability to properly handle funds. Why? Because we become convinced that it's more about power than it is anything else, right? Why? Because human nature's power hungry. That's not just a political issue, gang. Okay, that's a Garden of Eden sin. We act like God held out on us, so we're going to leverage ourselves to get everything we think we can get. That's why the world's problems aren't solved by only throwing money at them. Because the next power broker comes in and figures out a way to leverage the money against the people group that you tried to throw the money, right? So what Paul's saying is, man, look, we give cheerfully because money really it's a currency. It's part of how we express love. It's not how we leverage power. It's not how we get power. It's not how we convey power. Money is just one of the parts of our life that allows us to convey love. Money as a currency of love is far greater than money as currency of power. And so we give generously. We spend less than we make, but then we want to give it generously. We want to just kind of unload it. Proverbs chapter 22 says it this way, just kind of playing out. The generous will themselves be blessed because they share their food with the poor. Like do you see it? There's like this double blessing, this double good in our generosity. The receiver is blessed, and we'll talk about receiving in a couple weeks. This receiver is blessed, but the giver is. It's working both ways. And as we follow the story of Jesus throughout the Scriptures and we watch how people engage with God and they follow God, can I tell you what one of the most natural results is? Is that living giving is living like God. Living giving is living like God. When we live as givers, when we find ourselves giving, we're starting to find ourselves displaying some of the very core nature of who God is. Remember, He gave us life in the garden. He gave us opportunity. He gave us creation to enjoy. He gave us each other to enjoy. He gave His presence. He's given a nation of Israel. He gave them leadership and guidance. He gave them love. He gave them grace. He gave us Jesus. He gives us forgiveness. He gives us the hope of heaven. He gives dream and imagination and creativity. He's a giver by nature. And when we're living giving, we're living like God. And so we start with this thing in the middle that says, man, let's not spend more than we make, but let's give generously. Not reluctantly, not with guilt, not with somebody twisting our arm, but because we're so captured by our God who is a giver that the very natural thing we would do is become givers. And one thing that can help our giving is if we fill in the next piece, and that's we resist debt. If we could resist debt along the way, resist the use of debt. Now, some, including Ron Blue, would actually say avoid the use of debt. But here's kind of the thing, and Ron Blue would even say this, that the story of God does not say that debt is somehow a sin. In fact, there's lots of interaction in the Scriptures about how we live in debt and how we live with people in debt, how we would loan people money and how, right? But we got to be careful there because we happen to live in a culture that's kind of taught us that debt is the way to live like you want to live even when you can't afford to live there. Debt has kind of taught us that to buy now what you hope to be able to afford later. And yet we got to be super careful. I mean, look at this proverb, and you've heard it, right? Even if you didn't know this was from the Bible, you've heard this proverb, right? The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is the slave to the lender, right? Some of you didn't even know this in the Bible, right? But there's a truth to that, right? It's like, okay, so how do we use it? We want to just think this through and say, look, how do I use debt wisely? How do I resist it? How do I make sure it's not my first compulsion? How do I make sure it's not my first option? How do I make sure it's not my first move? How could I limit it? How could I, if at all possible, live without any of it? Right? I mean, right? And yet some of us, we're in it and we understand the weight of it, right? We understand the weight of living in the debt, right? It's like, I have this thing that's, wait a second. I want to be really careful there. And the other side is also true. When we're the loaner, when we're the one who makes the loan, when we're the one who tries to help, we want to be super careful. We don't want people to have to live enslaved to us. So we resist the use of debt, which continues to allow us to give generously, right? Those do go together. Those feed off of one another. Let me give you a fourth one. Plan for margin. Plan for margin. Plan for margin. Can I just have a moment of raw honesty here with us for a second? There are very few things that get more traction than we here talk about margin and rest, like physical margin and rest, okay? People come out of the woodwork, right? So much so that then some people go on like margin plus, right? It's like that's all we have is margin, right? But why? Because we're some of us have run ourselves into the ground. I mean, we get a little tired, right? And so we come for this margin thing. And yet what I'm often struck by is in how many conversations we can have where we're clamoring for physical rest, but planning for zero financial margin, which is just as tiring. Right? It wears us down just as much to live with no financial margin, to constantly be at the edge, to constantly be living on more than, right? But there's the thing, let's plan for margin. Let's look at this. Look at this proverb. I like this one. I think this one's kind of fun. Just check this out. Go to the ant. And this is where I go for my theology lessons, right? Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer, no ruler. Yet it stores its provisions in the summer and gathers its food at harvest. Right? Do you see it? There's like this. Hey, look at even the ant has a plan. Let's have a plan. And plans look different for everybody. Some of you, your best friend is an Excel chart, right? And you're afraid to tell Quicken that the Excel is your best friend because you're also a friend of Quicken, all right? Your plan is a plan upon a plan upon a plan upon a plan, right? And that's great, and that's totally okay, and that's fine. There's others of us that the plan is a little looser, it's a little more gentle, it's a little, right? It doesn't really, the thing is just say, could we have a plan for what's coming? Could we anticipate what we should see coming while also allowing ourselves the flexibility to be spontaneous even in our generosity? Could we anticipate what we should see coming while at the same time allowing ourselves a little spontaneity when an opportunity for generosity comes up? Like, let's just use the obvious one, right, that you and I all have. Whichever car we're driving, it's not going to last forever. It just isn't. I mean, it's right. It's somewhere. It's going to go. We wanted our last van to go forever, and it made it 284,000 miles. Okay, I know, it's awesome, right? And honestly, it was the body that was falling apart more than the engine. It's like we couldn't keep doors closed anymore, and we just thought with kids we shouldn't drive that way. So I mean, it's like we got to do something here, right? It's not going to last. So why? Let's see it coming. Let's see it coming. Let's plan so that when it comes, we've already built in some margin. We kind of see what's coming. As best as we're able with what we make, right? As best as what we make allows us, as best as what we have coming in, as best as it allows us, let's have a plan. Let's think about it. Jesus talked about it in all of life this way in Luke 14. He said, look, let's consider things. If you want to build a tower, you want to build a house, you want to buy a car, you want to take a trip, you want to have an experience, you want to wait for something in the future, you want to have... Sit down and figure out what it costs. Let's have the wisdom to slow down long enough to estimate the cost so that we could have enough money to complete it. As far as it depends on us, let's have a plan. Let's have the wisdom to say, I see this coming. I'd like to be ready as best as I possibly can, knowing that we don't control the economy, we don't control everything about our job, as best I can, I'd like to estimate the cost on what I see coming and have a plan. Listen, do you see how they're all fitting together? If we spend less than we make, then we actually have a little freedom to give generously. And if we're giving generously, we're not really going to want to have any more debt than absolutely necessary because that robs what we can give generously. And if we're living without debt, then we start to say, how am I going to avoid that debt long haul? What I really want to do is I want to be planning to live with some margin. I want to be planning to live with some margin. Let me give you one more. This might be the one that I think is most significant. Just for me personally, is set long-term goals. Just set long-term goals. Just say, what does it look like? What's the long-term goal? What's the way out there thing? See, we can kind of have some goals and stages. Like what's just the goal for this year, maybe even this month? Just what are we trying to get done? What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to see happen? What bill are we trying to pay off? What thing are we trying to get out from under? What amount are we trying to save? What amount are we trying? What's the goal? And then we can have some little bit longer goals. What do we want to have if one day we think we want to retire? What's that going to take? What's the cost estimation of that? How's that going to work? What's that going to be like? What's it going to be? How do I want to help my kids with college? What's that going to look like? How much do I want to help? How much do I not want to help? What's that? I kind of have a plan. But then there's an even longer term goal where you say, hey, look, what's my goal about everlasting things? What's my goal about eternal things? What do I want to be invested in that's way going to outlast my life? What do I want to invest in that's about heavenly things, that's about righteousness and joy and peace and salvation? What do I want to invest in that's that long term? I got some things right now, and then I got some mid-range goals, which is kind of our life on this earth. Did you catch that? I got some mid-range goals, which are kind of about life on this earth. As followers of Jesus, our long-term goals don't go 80 or 90 years. They go eternity. We say, what am I invested in for the long haul? What are the marks of the kingdom that I want to leave behind? What are my longest term goals? And here's why this is so important. Proverbs 29:18 says this. This is why thinking about this is so big. This is all of life. Let's think about it in the context of money here. Where there's no revelation, where there's no vision, where there's no divine inspiration about how we're seeing something, where there's no God-given look into the future, where there's no revelation, people cast off restraint. They live without boundaries. We live without guidelines. We live without guardrails. We just lose sight of ourselves. We start tripping over ourselves. One translation says, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction. Listen, do you hear revelation and vision and wisdom connected? They go together. If there's no vision, what are you looking for wisdom for? If there's no vision, what wisdom could we possibly have? We need a vision so that we understand where the wisdom is leading us. And so there's this thing, okay, when it comes to our funds, like what's the long term? What's the short-term goal of what I want to get accomplished in the next year, the next 5 years, next 10 years? What's my mid-range goal about what retirement might look like or what my kids might look like? What's that goal, right? But then what's my long-term goal? What am I investing in that matters for the sake of eternity? What am I investing in that's about shaping Jesus' kingdom on the earth? What's that one? What's my long-term goal? See, it's this thing where I think it gets really easy for us to kind of feel like, where's my money going? What am I really doing? Where am I really headed? It gets easy to get upside down with the slightest of curveballs. And I wonder if Ron Blue and leaning into the story of Scriptures the way he did, I wonder if he's handed us this blueprint to say, let me help you make sense of this. Let me help you make sense. Hey, couldn't you imagine? Couldn't you imagine taking those 5, that puzzle, to Congress and saying, here you go. Just try this. Right? Come on, wouldn't that be great? Here's how I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be fun just to take the puzzle and walk in and set it down and walk back out, right? We don't even need any words. But what if before we start thinking about doing that, before we start throwing rocks and blaming, what if we just invited Jesus' counsel in our own life on these? What if we just invited Jesus' direction and guidance and freedom and his hope and these for ourselves? What if we did it for our personal lives? What if we did it in our families? If you own a business, what if you just said, hey, what if Jesus invited me to operate my business that way? Would that take some stress off of me and some pressure off of me? Because I lived with him saying, hey, look, these are my ways. Now again, some of us just need a place to start. We need to begin. We said at the beginning last week, we want to be as just helpful as possible to one another in this. Part of what we're going to do at the end of this series is we're going to offer just a workshop, a few-hour workshop, and we're just going to kind of talk very, very practically about the ways to navigate things and how do we get started, and what if we feel like we're behind, and what if we feel like we're ahead but we wonder, and like what are we doing in this thing? And so on Saturday, March 16th, that's going to be available. You can actually register for it if you go to thejchurch.com/money. You can actually sign up for that. Again, just a few hours to try and be remarkably helpful and say, hey, wait a second. What if I need to get started in the middle? What if I just need some help on kind of spending and living on less than I earn? What if I got that down, but I'm wondering about generosity? And would just all of these all fit together? And so if it's at all helpful for you, I want to invite you just to take advantage of it. Just to say, hey, yeah, I'm going to learn every possible thing I can. I'm going to grab every resource I can. Because at the end of the day, life's purpose shapes money's purpose, not the other way around. And part of how we live in that, how we live in life's purpose first, is to say, Jesus, how have you invited us to live with our finances? So that's what we want to help each other do. Let's pray on it for just a minute. Jesus, thanks for your generosity. Thanks that you did lead and you do lead with generosity. And you lead with your hope for us and your life for us. I pray that you'd help us grab a hold of every practical thing you give us. I'm so grateful that you're not just some God of theory sitting around saying really complex things, but you're giving us counsel. You're giving us guidance in this life that you created for us to experience with you. I pray that you give us hearts and ears to hear. I pray that you give us encouragement. God, there are some of us who are in this room right now, and we are upside down, and it's daunting, and it's overwhelming. And I pray that the very first thing we would sense is your encouragement and your hope, and just this very real experience of you putting your arm around us and saying, I'm going to help you. I'm going to help you. I'm still with you. I'm still in this with you. God, for some of us, it's never been better. We're almost shocked at how good the condition of our finances seems. And we want to handle it well. We want to manage what you own very well. So we invite you to keep leading, to keep being our guide, to keep being our counselor in it. Thanks for every ounce of loving direction you give us. God, would you help us live very differently than the pattern of the world around us? Would you help us live in your freedom and your hope and just the assurance that comes from walking with you in this? We love you for it. We're grateful for you. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.